Square Ball Podcast.
Well, hello there. Welcome to the show. This one is brought to you with West Yorkshire Electrical, our sponsor on this one. It's powered by them. They do all sorts of wiry stuff.
They do, yeah. Solar panels, car chargers, lighting, alarms.
Roofs.
That's not electrical.
It's not, is it? But they still do them. And do you know why? Because they don't want a half-arse or let somebody half-arse your roof after they've done your solar panels. But that means they can do roofs separately as well. Would you believe it?
Well, I do believe it, yeah. I don't see why I'd be lying about it.
Well, they told us to tell everybody. So,
right, yeah.
So that's why we mentioned it, really. But wyelectrical.co.uk for details on that. You know what an electrician does. If you want one, give them a waz. Right then, Phil, Michael, here we go.
Here we go.
So
here we go. Yeah.
We just to fill you in, we normally do this twice a week. A message was exchanged on, was it Saturday morning that I sent you that message?
I was going to say a message was sent.
Yeah.
Yes, saying that.
Should we paraphrase rather than the words actually used?
No. The listenership might not be huge on the back of QPR. Therefore, it's probably best if I just got on the train, went home, and started drinking heavily.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't do that actually on Saturday, but I felt like it.
Yeah. It was not a great weekend, was it? Where Leeds United are concerned. The other side to this was, if we'd have recorded at the start of the week, we would have just said, well, we don't know what's going to happen until Coventry face Ipswich, and then they did face each other. Yeah,
it's been a strange finish, isn't it? Because there'd been games all over the place, but there wasn't much to dig out of QPR in a positive sense, apart from Ipswich actually still need to get something out of these two games, which they have. I saw Michael say on Twitter this week that it's kind of hard to begrudge Ipswich second place if they do get there, which it looks like they will. And I agree with that. They must have the lowest budget of the four clubs at the top. To my mind, on paper, I'm not sure you could say that that's a squad you would ever... I mean, they could finish up with 96 points at the weekend, and that is not a squad you thought had that in them at all. So they deserve it in the same way that Leicester finish 100 points, deserve it as well. I don't think Leeds don't deserve it. I think if they went up at the weekend, you couldn't say that they were lucky because you don't get to 90 points or 93 as it'll have to be through chance. But if they go up at the weekend in the context of this week behind them, they will have been very, very fortunate because that was a really poor show at QPR. I hate the idea that every time you lose in big circumstances, it goes down as a choke or whatever else, but it did feel like that on Friday. It felt like everybody froze, nobody played well, it didn't work, Farke wasn't really able to influence it. And the frustrating thing is that a win at QPR was all it would have taken for it to have been in their hands this weekend.
Or one of the wins against the other teams, like not losing to Blackburn. I think that's the point, isn't it? We've had 5 bites of the cherry now.
Yes.
And we've taken none of them. And it's hard to argue that we deserve it on that basis. Like you say, when you look at it in the sort of wider season-wide sense, yeah, they've done great, but it's been at the crucial moments, hasn't it? And seasons turn on moments, and at the moments when they had to deliver, as you say, they just haven't, sadly. And Ipswich stepped up at the time when it mattered. And it's funny, it dawned on me this week. People have been saying Ipswich will drop loads of points in April, and they did.
And so did Leeds.
Exactly.
And actually, as time's gone on, a lot of clubs up there, or including Southampton latterly, who are not in any sort of form at all, have dropped points. It was kind of wide open for anybody who could get it together. And you have to say that on the other side of the international break, I saw somebody at the weekend say the international break in March has been our sort of Crystal Palace moment, going back to that game against Palace last season when it was all in order. It all felt like it was going smoothly, and then flick the switch and suddenly there's it was kind of chaos last season. It's not been like that through April, but they came back after the break, and there were injuries, no doubt about that, which changed things. But I think there have been mistakes made as well, just lacking the same sort of vibrancy and freshness. Farke has struggled to re-inject them with that. I don't know if it is just because it's been a long season and it's catching up with them. I don't know if it is because the pressure has got to them, and it did feel like that at Loftus Road. I think over the last month, Leeds have started to look a little bit more like they were questioning themselves, like they were a bit more vulnerable than they had been previously. And there definitely seemed to be in QPR's attitude an attempt to try and, dig into that and to exploit that a bit. The way they went at Leeds, it was a case of saying, do Leeds have a thick skin here or don't they? And it was just a really, really poor performance down there, which, let's be honest, I think all of us came away from thinking, well, it's going to be the playoffs now. It's going to take a big big dose of charity from Ipswich. Otherwise, it will be third place. And what I thought was really telling at QPR was that the away crowd stuck with it. But when the fourth goal went in and it was the opposite end of the pitch, obviously you're just following it for a few seconds to get in your head exactly what had happened and make a few notes. And then I looked back across to the way end and it had just emptied in a matter of seconds. You know, it was still probably half full, but half of the crowd had just gone because they knew, I think, reflected how bad a defeat it had been, but they also knew what the implications were likely to be.
Funny, isn't it, that international break? I'm just looking at the form going into it, and we only dropped points against Huddersfield, didn't we?
I mean, you could argue going into that.
All calendar year.
It wasn't like they were all massively convincing performances, but we were getting it done, weren't we, I think, in a lot of those games. Like, you can look at like Sheffield Wednesday, Stoke. I don't think there were games that we felt like we were blowing teams away.
No. I don't think it ever can be totally convincing performances all the way through, though. There are days where you just have to do enough. But I don't think you really felt like they were scraping over the line particularly very often. I don't think you were coming away from too many games thinking, God, they got out of jail there, or they deserve less than they actually took. The injuries did make a difference, and I think Gruev in particular was probably the big one coming back from the international break, because it sort of tempted Farke to break up the Ampadu-Rodon partnership in the centre of defence for Watford, which wasn't a good move, and Leeds went from that statistic of, you know, no league goals conceded from open play since December to conceding 2 on the night and conceding them quite cheaply. And okay, it was always going to happen. You know, that record wasn't going to go on forever. But I think the three things that sort of stick out in my head since the international break finished are definitely that call, you know, with Ampadu and Rodon. Pirro up front against QPR, and not because I didn't understand it against Blackburn. I with Bamford out, you know, or the kind of need to change that as Farke did, because he was actually available. It was a tactical call, that one. I understood why he went for Pirro, but I felt that having seen it not work against Blackburn, as it clearly didn't, it felt like a bit of a gamble away at QPR. I know the alternative was Joseph, because Bamford wasn't fit to play or to make the bench, but it almost seemed like one of those nights where actually that was the time to roll the dice a little bit. And I do think as well over the past month that the question about how Farke changes games in-game using the bench have become more pertinent as well.
Yeah, that is the wider question, isn't it? Have we seen his limitations?
Yeah,
and I do wonder that. And what I would say is, the way I kind of view it, and I'll let you interject in a sec, Phil. I was just going to say, it's been good enough for the most part for most of the season to get to this points total. It clearly works. Whether you like the kind of slower, more possession-based football or not, it clearly is good enough for most of the time. Just under these circumstances in this season, it's not quite been good enough as it stands, barring a miracle.
I think the thing about turning games, though, is that for the most part we've been in games either ahead or level, so you can accept a lack of changes. Whereas in this, we're 2 down fairly early. There are quite glaring problems with the way the team is set up in midfield, the way nothing's sticking up front, and we still have to wait to. It was over an hour in, wasn't it, till we see a change? And I think the frustration there is you can almost understand it not making a first half change, because they are rare and maybe you want to let people settle. But then when it gets to half time and there's still nothing,
roll the dice. Were we 2-0 down at half time?
2-0 down, and good value for it, I would say, or bad value, whichever way you want to put that when you're losing. But it seemed obvious that there were changes to be made there. What
were you going to say, Phil? Sorry.
Well, just to touch on Michael's point first, QPR under Cifuentes have played a lot more with the ball than they did previously. They developed into a better team. I was quite impressed by them, actually, the way they retained possession and how confident they looked with it. So there was always a chance on the night that they were going to have a lot of it and were going to have periods where they dominated. And that is where you need somebody to be able to hold the ball up front to give you possession when it's not that easy to acquire elsewhere. And it wasn't happening with Pirro. I think we've seen through the season that is not his strength in any way. I'm with you. I thought at halftime, I said on Twitter, this is surely the point at which you need to get Joseph into it, just to give, because Joseph looks as close to anybody as close as anybody to Bamford in being able to play as an out and out 9 and to be able to do what you need a 9 to do in the Championship and also in kind of modern football generally. This is the thing with Farke. Somebody was saying to me, again on Twitter over the weekend, or was tweeting to say there's a lot of criticism of him and it seems really unfair given, the position they're in. And that's definitely true to a point, because it was a standing start in the summer. It was a bit of a shambles. you always have to say that he has one of the strongest squads in the division, and I think he does have a stronger squad than Ipswich. I don't think there's any question about that. So this team in this dressing room should have done well. And I think had it been anything less than the playoffs this season, you would have found yourself thinking, that didn't really get going at all. So you have to sort of accept that most of the season has been really, really good. But the fact is that coaches and managers tend to get defined by what happens at the critical moment when you either deliver or you don't. And you could almost say that that's pretty unfair, really. That you can have a broad kind of picture of really good work, but it's what happens on the vital days that really matter. And they haven't been able to do it right at the end. And that doesn't mean, I sort of hate this thing of anytime a club lose, it descends into who needs sacked, who needs replaced, which players need to go, who needs to be signed. It doesn't have to be like that. But I think if you're analysing the last month objectively, they have gone cold.
Yeah, totally. I would urge anybody who's watching or listening to read our mate Moscow's match report from the QPR game, and maybe sort of think about, it's on our website, thesquareball.net, maybe think about how this season's kind of panned out as a whole. And what Farke has preached has basically come to pass, which was aim for about 2 points per game. We'll see where it takes us in the end. And it feels like it's been a sort of very methodical, sort of process-driven season. And I've got it in my head that if we stay down this time, we'll end up on exactly the same points total next season, just because that's what the football gods like to do, and we'll end up winning the league or something silly like that. But when things have started to fall outside the sort of the process, and a bit of emotion and a bit of kind of, I don't know, these crunch games have come around. We've kind of got to the 2 points per game mark, but it's needed more than that. And it was delivering the more than that he's ultimately fallen down on, assuming that the miracle doesn't happen, because it still may.
It's unfortunate in some respects, and he will probably resent the fact that it's gone the way it has this season in a year where you've got Leicester who are heading for 100 points potentially, and Ipswich who might finish on 96. And, Leeds seem to be very good at getting sort of unwanted championship records pinned to them. So in the same way as they were the first team to ever win away from home in the first leg of the playoff semi-finals and then lose on aggregate, they could well be the first team to go beyond 90 points and finish third in the table as well. And that is a fairly big kick in the teeth. So you're right. What he preached was, 2 points a game, but he spoke a lot, didn't he, about 26 wins, draws on top of that to get you into the top two. He spoke to the club before the season started about 75 goals and saying that should be give or take enough to get you up. And they've kind of cleared all of those benchmarks. And I think privately you'll probably agree with this, that he's done a really good job through the season. He has. But this is the point where it really matters, and this is the point where you really want to deliver. And the reason why it's got a bit tetchy at Liverpool, and the reason why Klopp isn't going to go out of this saying, well, do you know what, we had a good bash this season, is because in the end, coaches want to win as much as players. Coaches like that want it to happen. And you find this with Guardiola. Manchester City are great at just pushing the button when they need to push the button, turning the screw when they need to do that, and in the end, coming out on top. And there have been periods this season where City's form and results have been criticised, where individual players like Haaland have been criticised, where there's been loads of talk about Liverpool's momentum under Klopp, and for a period, this thing of actually, do they need a new manager, or have they got the manager that they need? And then with Arsenal, this idea that they've become this sort of impenetrable model under Arteta. But none of it will mean anything if at the end of the season it goes the way it always seems to go, which is City finish top. And that is because there's nothing coaches want more than trophies and achievements and success. And yes, Farke will be able to say, look, we did really well. If Leeds don't go up in the end, we did really well. Look at the points, look at the results. And there isn't much arguing with that. But that's not why he came here.
No, absolutely not. Going back to the international break, actually, and the effect that it had, I like that description of it maybe being the Crystal Palace moment, that moment when it flipped. And yeah, the injuries did play a part.
I don't think any club wanted it less, put it that way.
But we had framed it in our minds, and we'd said on this show, wouldn't it be a psychological boost to go into that break top of the table? And I wonder if it kind of spooked the horses a little bit. Actually, being top gave them a couple of weeks to think about it. We came back with a couple of injuries, and suddenly you've got to make it work again and get it going again, almost like a little a mini reset, if you like, and it just never quite did.
It's possible. It's possible to go back to Moscow's piece and what he was saying about the emotion outside of a strict game plan or the process, as you put it. I was saying that a couple of weeks ago I'd asked Farker about whether you have to be kind of prepared and open to gamble at this stage of the season where you've got to take risks and not necessarily take risks in dire circumstances like QPR where you suddenly feel like, right, we better just throw everything on here, but to take risks before it gets to that point. And I suppose that feeds a little bit back into, Joseph over Pirro. I definitely wasn't one of those people who, 5 or 6 weeks ago was saying Joseph has to start. I didn't feel like that. And I would be lying if I said that before Blackburn, I was thinking, well, that's a completely ridiculous decision. I understood Pirro coming into the team, but I did think what happened against Blackburn was replicated in some way by what happened at QPR. It was the same type of performance from Pirro where he wasn't really involved in it properly. So I think there are definitely ways in which this month could have been different, and I don't just mean in terms of results.
What about the management of the players? Because I think it was, and if it wasn't, please forgive me, but I think it was on the BBC Radio Leeds Don't Go to Bed Just Yet podcast. I heard it mentioned that Joseph has never been deployed in just a general game plan, in the normal game plan. He's always been thrown on when we've tried to make tactical changes.
Chelsea being the exception, obviously.
Well, this is the point I was going to come to. Chelsea being the exception, and he scored. And he performed really, really well when he was just in the usual shape. And I'd not really thought about that he's been deployed in a kind of, I don't want to call it Hail Mary circumstances, but often it has been a bit of a Hail Mary, hasn't it?
Dare I call it the Gelhardt? Where it's a bit like on you go and see what you can do. And the thing about Joseph is he does look at first glance and on the basis of a small number of minutes, he looks like somebody who knows how to score and knows where to position himself. He looks like a pretty natural centre forward. And I think at Chelsea kind of threw one of those goals, didn't they, down there? But the second one, the header, was kind of like classic number 9 play of getting between your marker, preempting the cross coming in, giving yourself a chance so that if the cross is on the money, you can score from there. And I feel like we've probably seen enough from Joseph this season to feel like on a night like Friday, you could have taken a gamble on him. I don't think it really felt like it felt like a massive Hail Mary. He looks physically fine. He looks technically really good. It might not have worked. And that was always the risk 6-7 weeks ago, was that you were saying, just get him in the team. And then if it doesn't work, where do you go from there? But as I say, there do seem to come points where you maybe need to just take it, push it a little bit further, gamble a little bit more. And I don't imagine Farker will say, yeah, I should have done that. But you can't help thinking that he must be looking back at Friday thinking the things I should have done differently.
I don't even necessarily think it is a gamble, because you're only trading him for Pirro, and we've seen that set up several times, and it hasn't worked. So if Joseph doesn't work, you can go, well, the other thing didn't work either. So I'm just trying something new for a change.
And the fact is, you don't have Bamford who had that knee injury, so you have to take a view, don't you? It's not like there are limitless options up there. But yeah, you're right. With Joseph, it's been a bit more like the Gelhardt thing, where it was, get him on, see what he can do. Gelhardt had that sort of purple patch where he looked like he was going to do something every time he came on. I mean, that's obviously completely faded now. But Joseph is very much in that mould. And I have to be honest, I think if Leeds want to go up, and I hope they do, and even if they do, but if Leeds want to go up, you'd want to see Joseph immediately pushed, much further forward when it came to the pecking order.
Yeah, I mean, we should say we have the luxury of hindsight here, don't we? Of course, and the fact that as football fans...
Other people were saying this before.
I know, but the other side to this is what we discussed on the way into this game, which is there's probably a certain amount of man management where Pirro's concerned. Yeah. Because the message it sends about bypassing Pirro and putting Joseph in, a young player coming through, versus your 10, 11 million pound signing from Swansea, is at a crucial time of the season, is quite a difficult sell when it comes to squad management and man management, isn't it?
Although arguably you could say it sends a bad signal that he just plays regardless, even when he's performing badly. You could say that sends a bad signal to the squad as well, that certain people are guaranteed a place regardless. It doesn't matter what they actually have done in the previous game.
I mean, I suppose what it does expose to a certain extent is perhaps just a little, and again, it's with hindsight, I know that, and the other is always the answer, isn't it, when it comes to football fans and journalists as well. You tend towards the other being the answer, because you can't disprove it, can you? It may be just a slight shortcoming when it comes to recruitment, in that maybe was Pirro the right signing ultimately? If you can't rely on him in the crucial moments, then did it work or did it work enough? It doesn't have to be a pass or a fail. It's not a binary situation, is it?
He's scored a good number of goals. He's definitely helped to get them to 90 points. I don't think it goes down as a bad signing or a failed signing in any way, but it's not been a season-defining signing either. I wouldn't have said. The one thing I would point out about QPR was it wasn't really just Pirro, was it? No. I mean, that was not a good performance from him, but it just seemed flat and it seemed nervy all over the pitch.
And it was tetchy as well. And like you could see in Nonto was just having one of those days where
where the occasions where you were sort of saying, "Look, just get on with it," because you're 2-0 down and it doesn't really help anybody, this being broken up. But I think after 10 minutes in the press box before QPR, or just shortly before QPR scored the first goal, because it was quite early, we were saying to each other, they look a bit, if not rattled here, they look like they've frozen a touch, or they've taken, they've been slow in getting going. And QPR were the better team from the off and totally deserved that win. And I've got to say, at 3-0, you felt it was going on 4 or 5.
I must say, with the frustrations about Farke, it is worth saying as well, I know in the context of this week, everyone's in a bit of a panic, but every single manager we've ever had, and any club has ever had, you get these frustrations with managers where you go, why is he still playing Tyler Roberts? Why is Wilkinson playing Nigel Worthington? I'm sure there were people criticising Reevy, saying, I can't believe he's still playing whoever, when so-and-so should have a go.
Yeah.
There's always that
Everyone's got a blind spot, haven't they?
Exactly.
You just have to have a boundary in the analysis that doesn't inevitably stray. And this is kind of, I'd love to know if it was like this with Reevy and the 60s and 70s. I suspect not, but that it always goes beyond the boundary of, so let's sack everybody, let's get rid of everybody. It's like that thing of needing to have consequences. And I know that seasons that are a failure or don't work out tend to have consequences, but it's hard to get away from the feeling that he's done a really good job, Farke. Yeah. He has, and he's kind of delivered what he said he was going to deliver in terms of points. There's just come an absolutely decisive moment where Leeds haven't done it, Ipswich have, Leicester obviously have as well, but I think Leicester smashing Southampton was crucial for them. Do you remember we were saying for weeks and weeks and weeks, well, that could be a big game, Leicester, Southampton, that could help. And then we were talking about Ipswich having games backed up. You do feel now like you were left relying on things happening elsewhere. Southampton got an absolute chasing away at Leicester. Ipswich dug a really, really big win out of Coventry. It wasn't great. I think they deserved it on the basis of what I watched. But, deflected goal, it was all, the bits of it were kind of scrappy, but there's absolutely no point in sitting and saying that they've magicked this out of nothing, because they haven't. They've been a really good team all season. And it's on us, isn't it, ultimately, the last few weeks?
Completely.
It's our drop points that have opened the door.
Well, yeah, I mean, I always say, like, I never go, criticise VAR and referees and everything else, but I never go along with the idea that there are other factors that mean that you don't get there in the end. And you could pick through this month and say, the penalty decision that wasn't given when Rodon went up for that header, that was, could have made a difference. Little bits and pieces here and there. But I think in the same way as when Leeds went down last season, there wasn't really any attempt by the fan base to start, drumming up conspiracy theories or, kind of throwing stones elsewhere. It was very much a rational case of, this is entirely our fault. We'd walked into this, we've invited it, and we need to suck it up. And I do get the feeling as well that, there's nobody out there who's thinking that Leeds have been kind of stiffed in some way here, apart from the fact that they have got so many points and need a miracle still on Saturday, which is obviously going to happen, isn't it, Dan?
Well, I will tell you why in a second. But I was just going to say that my overriding feeling off the back of the QPR game was one of annoyance with myself for believing that we maybe had, shed our old skin and we were going to do it differently, because we've kind of put a number of hoodoos to bed this year. We've got rid of a few of those, overcome them. It's just, but we've reverted to that type that just, I don't know what it is. It's something in our DNA. And
the hoodoo for Leeds, though, is always the moment, isn't it?
Yeah.
Do you do it or do you not?
But do you know what? I really do think, talking of shedding skins, I think we need to shed this skin of being the perpetual bridesmaids. We need to get over it from a psychological point of view, because...
But we had done that with Bielsa.
That's what I thought.
That's the thing.
Yeah, but even then, the anxiety going into that final stretch and like the Barnsley game was hideous. Or the Luton game,
did it.
I know we did, but that's the thing is that
that's the hump. He's actually doing it, and we did it.
No, I know, but what I was going to say was we've not done it more often than we have done it. I can remember in my lifetime seeing that, like going, oh shit, we've blown this in 1990, and then 1992 again. Oh shit, we've blown this. It was far more pronounced in 92 than it was in 90. But I've seen us overcome difficult circumstances. But the problem is, since about then until Bielsa. And as you've said, Phil, before, there's this tendency to think that we're just reverting to type, that football fans kind of, well, all that was a mirage. And I think so much of what happened with Bielsa has been rightfully put on Bielsa's shoulders that you take him out of the equation and you're left with everything else. And you go, well, that's what we're really like. This is what we do. We choke. And I genuinely think we need to overcome that. We need to kind of get rid of it and kind of, I don't know, it's like, it's feel the fear and do it anyway, isn't it? It's embrace the madness, ride the wave. And that's I think how we've got to try and maybe reframe our thinking going into the playoffs, is that everyone's kind of doom and gloom about it. And don't get me wrong, I have been as well. But just say, do you know what? If it is the playoffs now, then let's embrace it, because if we don't win the playoffs and we don't get to that final, and the stakes are horribly, horribly high, I hate thinking about it. I hate thinking about being at Wembley again and losing, because against Doncaster it was hideous. I hate the idea of losing, but also the idea of winning is far more seductive. I mean, I think if we were to do it in the playoff final, I think that's more fun than going up second. But again, the stakes are just so high that it's frightening.
The thing about the Bielsa season was that really big club Leeds. And if you take 16 years to get promoted and go through a lot of what Leeds have gone through in that period, you have to capitalise on it, which they just didn't. So having got over that huge hump, that huge hurdle of actually getting out of the Championship, yeah, they had the first season under Bielsa, but then it was allowed to slip from there. And it's been, the mistakes that were made on the way to getting relegated again have been really costly, because it does deny you that kind of period of tranquility where you can grow and you can develop and you can actually play week to week. And I don't know whether this is a good thing, because we moaned lots about this in the Premier League, but you can play without vast jeopardy, because if you're better than the teams at the bottom, in the bottom three positions in the Premier League, and you keep a good distance away from them, you know that nothing bad's going to happen. It might not be a particularly exciting season, might not be successful, but you know that you'll be there again the following year. So it's not the kind of stress of that. This has been the thing, you see. It's been like almost 2 decades for Leeds of season after season having to go after something, having to go after a trophy, and it does wear you down. It's probably why Klopp is quitting after 9 years at Liverpool, because eventually, it does drain you to a certain point.
Quitter. I've been doing this for 40 odd years now.
Well, yeah, I'm almost up to 20 seasons.
I was going to say, not that I can remember much of the early part. I was mainly sort of running around the back of the old Lowfield stand trying to get a massive wagon wheel in my hands. But
it's ludicrous how quickly time goes. But then again, there's the 16 years of being out of the Premier League. That seemed, a lot of that seems like a blur to me, but that's a long stretch. They do have this thing, Leeds, definitely, and I think the playoffs are probably the best example of it, of fearing the worst.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's true of every club. I just don't think it is, but it's become ingrained around here, particularly with the playoffs. I was saying this on the previous podcast, that it's got into everybody's heads in a big way. You can feel it, and it's fine sitting saying, because rationally, Leeds should be the best. If Leeds end up in the playoffs, they should be the best team going into it. They've had the best performance of the 4 clubs over the season. They've been considerably better in terms of results than Norwich and West Brom, although I do worry with Norwich, particularly about the way in which they've come into form at a good time.
I mean, the narrative aspect of that as well
is horrific, yeah. But I can't go into it saying, yeah, totally confident of them winning the playoffs, because I've covered every single playoff campaign apart from the 87 one. I said in my piece last Friday, that's like the best goal Sheridan probably ever scored, that, or one of them, and still, late on, and it still gets negated and comes to.
Oh, Phil, I mean,
nothing.
I can remember just about in the distant recesses of my memory, the semi-final was hideous as well when we played Oldham, because I think we beat them 1-0 at Ellen Road, and then we were 2-0 down, and they scored a last-minute goal to go 2-0 up, so we were going out. And then straight off the kickoff, we went up the other end and scored and made it 2-1, which then went to extra time, and we went through on away goals. But we were staring defeat in the face in that playoff semi-final as well, right up until that last minute and that kickoff. And then again in the final was a 2-legged affair, home and away. We lost at Charlton 1-0. We beat Charlton 1-0 at home, and it went to the third game, the replay at Birmingham, which again we we went in front in extra time and thought, this is it.
Mm-hmm.
And
You will
wasn't.
say for the playoffs, as much as I hate them, and this season I think it'd just be much fairer if the top three went up.
Definitely.
They are consistently brilliant, aren't they? In terms of what they produce for drama and what have you.
I think the reason you know that as well is because you don't get, like, obviously you've just said what you've said, but you don't get griping every year about, wait a minute, we finished 20 points clear. The occasional person says this isn't very fair, but everybody's kind of accepted that is the structure and that's how it's going to work. And they are really good. They're far more enjoyable if you're not in them unless you win them. But that comes with hindsight. Again, I don't think in the moment you necessarily enjoy them that much. I suppose if it is players for Leeds, it doesn't come down to us, does it? And I know you need a certain atmosphere, and I know you like nerves at Ellen Road or whatever else don't help, but it's going to come down to the way in which Farke and the players can manage themselves psychologically, the way in which they can turn it on when it really matters. It will come down to the football, and it will come down to the minds of the footballers that Farke has and himself, not least if it was to be Carrow Road in the first leg, because there's all sorts around that. I mean, absolutely all sorts.
I mean, doesn't that line itself up for a final or Coburn, one of the two, which is likely possibly to be the case?
Who would you rather?
None of them, but from a narrative aspect, I've got a feeling if we are to do the playoffs, it'll be Norwich and West Brom probably will end up
Could still be Hull
playing, or we beat Southampton handsomely on the final day as we chase automatics, which doesn't come to pass, and then that's repeated in the playoff final, and it's a monumental struggle compared to because people are going, we're beating Southampton the other week 4-0 or something like that, and then it comes to the playoff final and it's awful. Mm-hmm. That's the sort of, these are the disaster scenarios I've got unfolding in my mind, and I just lean towards the optimism, and I want to, for my own well-being, I suppose, more than anything, just try and embrace it as an opportunity rather than something to be dreaded. I don't know, which I suppose is what I was trying to get at before.
When it comes to set it all on fire options, do you think Farke's job is safe regardless? Or do you think a defeat at Southampton and dropping out the playoffs?
Set it all on fire.
Do you think there's a temptation to go get Big Sam back?
I think
not actually, by the way.
The two things with that. One is that it's quite hard to argue with the season as a whole. And I think the 49ers tend to be quite rational in thought. So I guess if you were analysing it, you would probably say, yes, you're going to have to sell players and you're going to have to dance around PSR. But if you can get a good squad together again, then perhaps you do go close to 90 points, and it could easily be enough, because it does tend to be enough in most seasons. Also, it is a long contract, so that factors into PSR calculations as well, makes it more difficult to sack people. It seems a little harsh that we're kind of having this conversation. When it comes to psychology, I think the Derby game got away from Leeds because it just descended into panic. It went from this position of everything seeming under control to suddenly realising that it was all going haywire and nobody really knew how to get a grip of it. And I think when you're like Bielsa on the touchline for that, and he wouldn't accept this, he wouldn't say there's nothing I can do, but I think it's incredibly difficult. You can make changes off the bench, but it's very difficult to get the players in a sort of airplane style. He just starts slapping everybody and saying, snap out of it. You kind of lose control. But on the flip side, I always think about the final at Watford and the fireworks going off behind Blackwell's team as they were lined up on the pitch, and them all jumping out of their skin and just giving that impression of looking absolutely petrified. And if you kind of look like that, you must feel like that to an extent, and that's what you've really, really got to manage.
Controlling the nerves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it's not like there are not very, very good players in this squad.
So, sign from the gods then. All right. So I've got a playlist that I've built on Spotify, and it's I think it's about 104 hours now, and it's my everything playlist. Mm-hmm. I'm creating one giant playlist with all the songs I've ever sort of experienced, listened to, played as a DJ and stuff like that.
Well, we have to sit through this when you die. Like, we'll have to go to the church for like 3 weeks.
Hopefully the algorithm will spit something out nice. But you know what? It played for me on the way in today. It's Jackson Sisters, I Believe in Miracles, came up. So I normally get through about 5 or 6 songs on the way in here, 20-minute journey, something like that.
This is the biggest reach of all reaches I've ever heard.
So, no. I mean, look, I've fully resigned myself to the playoffs, but I thought it was quite funny, actually, of all the things that we were going to come in and talk about, that got spat out. It's a good song, by the way.
Yeah, it is. It is. I sort of felt on Tuesday, like if Ipswich got a point at Coventry, it would probably be enough, because it is Huddersfield for them, and things happen. But Huddersfield at home is probably, with one exception, the game you would pick. No, for finish up.
It's a bit like Wigan at home.
Yeah. Well, it did. I mean, QPR did feel a little bit like Farke's Wigan moment, where they were a better team than Wigan. QPR definitely, but where it all just kind of froze. And
I think Blackburn felt Wigan-y to me.
It definitely felt Wigan-y, but it wasn't quite the
Wigan-y. Is that
Wigan-y? That's quite a good adjective. That. Yeah,
very Wigan-y game, this, isn't it?
Yeah, it didn't feel like a choke though. Blackburn.
It's not Derby, it's Wigan-y.
Yeah, which all falls under the greater verb
of Leeds.
Of Leeds. Was it adjective? Sorry.
Yeah,
being
I
Leeds,
think so.
right?
Yeah,
No, I didn't mean verb.
Yeah.
Verbs are doing words. I do remember that from school.
Doing a Leeds, you can do a Leeds.
Yes, doing a Leeds. Yeah.
There'll almost certainly be a point on Saturday where it's 0-0 at Portman Road. Leeds go a goal up, and you think,
hang on,
oi. And who's to say? To say?
If you're going to be thoroughly pessimistic about this, Phil, what we're going to see is Sam Morsey sent off 4 minutes, Huddersfield 2 up, Leeds 0-0, game finishes.
Yeah, just cannot find the breakthrough. 25 shots on target.
I think what's far more likely is Leeds win.
Izzy Brown off the bench.
Leeds win, Ipswich win, and
it's as you were.
Yes. Yeah.
But just imagine that. That's the thing, is that there's that time, and this is what I resent more than anything. Actually, I said I resented myself for believing we might be different. I resent the fact that they have strung this along right till the final day, and no matter what you think, there's just that tiny part that says, "What if just this?"
To me, it feels like the last day of last season does this, though, where I've gone, but no.
But is that not the arena in which just very occasionally mad things can happen because you go into them? When we've gone in with expectations, they've let us down. When we've gone in with none,
they've also let us down.
This is the entire gist of the piece that I wrote today, or at least the start of it, is that the worst thing about football is that sort of 1% chance, where if it doesn't fall into place, as it's not likely to, afterwards you think, I wish they'd just taken the axe to us like 2 weeks ago, and then we could have had 2 weeks of peace. And there's that thing, you've got to be pleased to an extent that there's still a minor chance this weekend, but there must be a little bit that wishes that Ipswich had just got it done.
Well, this is the thing. It goes back to what I was saying prior to the QPR game, which is all I want is a nice day with my mates, really, more than anything, just to enjoy it. Is like it's dangling.
Go to Alton Towers.
No, dangling that 1% chance of one of the best days ever in my footballing life could happen at the weekend. It's the tiniest chance.
If you fancy backing it, we are 17-1,
but it still exists. No, we're not going. I know we're not going to do it, but it's the fact that it's not impossible is the thing I'm kind of clinging on to, because we could come back in here next week and go, fucking hell, that was amazing.
Yeah, no, definitely.
We won't. We'll be going, right, it's playoffs.
Yeah, there's a definite chance that Saturday becomes immensely frustrating because Southampton pass and pass and pass. I was just having a look beforehand, actually. 32,322 attempted passes by Southampton this season. Leeds are on 25,000. The mighty Rotherham are on 15,000. It causes a bit of, growling and moaning down at Southampton that sometimes it is just ball back and forth. I know there's a bit of that at Leeds as well, but they really do push it to extremes. And I think if it's one of those days where Ipswich are, say, 2-0 up and it's all working out for them, and say it's 0-0 at Leeds and the ball's just going round and round and round, it's going to be hard work, isn't it?
Yeah. Did you see was it the Crew? I'm going to say Colchester game at the weekend, the final league game of the season, where definitely Crew were involved anyway. It was there was like a 92nd minute, I think, equaliser or something. It was very late equaliser, and the draw was perfect for both teams as it stood, and it meant that I think one of them qualified for the playoffs and the other stayed up as a result of the draw. So the manager just told them all to back off. So they were in their two respective halves, and I think it was Crew just passing it round at the back, just going to you. There
was a Huddersfield Barnsley game that ended like that, wasn't there? A few years ago.
It was just dead funny.
Where both sets of supporters were just singing "We All Hate Leeds" as they passed it around.
But there's an interesting question around what Southampton are going to do this weekend, because they know that they are 100% playoffs. We are very highly likely to be playoffs, but that little tiny chance means that Leeds have got to go for it.
Yes. Well, I've absolutely got to win. Yeah.
I think we've got to win just for momentum's sake as well, and just to get people feeling like we can win again, because after that QPR game, you could find reason to say, well, that's it now.
We're never going to win
Shut
again.
the club down.
No, that has been a genuine thought of mine this week. Just that it'd be easier
Just
if all this
liquidate the whole thing.
if it all just went away.
Huddersfield may choose that. In fact, if they manage to beat Ipswich and gift us promotion while they go down, they may just decide to not bother anymore.
God, their fans would hate that. That would be the ultimate payoff. Getting relegated.
It'd be the worst day ever. Wouldn't it?
I hadn't really thought of it in those terms, but yeah.
Unless they win 15-0 and stay
Every time player wanders past the away end for a throw-in, just throw it to them.
Have you seen? I saw on Twitter this morning, not verified, but apparently there's so many Huddersfield fans have been selling their tickets onto Ipswich fans because obviously Ipswich fans want to be there for the promotion party. That the club have had to step in and put a stop to it because Huddersfield don't want to be there. Because the best worst outcome is that they help to promote us, which they're not going to do, are they?
Just have a day. We've done this before, like when we beat Arsenal to give Scum the title that time when
Just be a set of
Hasselbank scored.
bastards.
Yeah, and when
We just
at
did it for
Watford,
the sake of it.
Remember that game at Watford where they
Don
ended up
Napoleon
with
killed
the
them, man.
seventh choice keeper
But we are one of the,
half an hour of injury.
and I wear this as a badge of honour, we are one of the most bloody-minded, petty, horrible set of bastards in the whole of the game of football, aren't we?
Oh, well.
Dear me. I mean, who knows? I mean, all those bookmarks I've got for this season, the Leicester have been crowing quite a lot this week. To a strange extent, actually. I'm surprised they've made it so much about Leeds.
It's what football does, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's fine. I've just not
You know
seen
how
it.
it is. When it's you that's doing it, it's very funny, isn't it? When it's other people who are doing it, it's very petty.
I think it is. No,
yeah.
I think you're within your rights to rub people's noses in it. Because I remember like Stuart Dallas singing the song about Thomas Frank and all that, and that really rubbed them up the wrong way. You should remember and so and so. But you just bookmark it all, keep it all for future, and as you say,
then quietly
Michael,
delete it when it all goes wrong.
You don't need to engage with it, do you? If you ignore it, it has no effect on you.
I did think I predict the playoffs was by the standards of football was quite clever, actually. Yeah. You just got to suck it up, haven't you?
Absolutely, take your medicine at the times when you need to. But it would be lovely. Imagine if the miracle did happen, being able to play that on Saturday afternoon and just going absolutely wild.
Yeah, when Hearts beat Hibs in that Scottish Cup final for about 2 years, here we are.
Grandad's off again.
For about 2 years afterwards, their chairman and manager, players and others were constantly caught in photos of people who pretended to be Hibs fans, got them in a photo and did 5-1 behind the head, and this just went on for ages and ages. So it's very funny to all of us, but I can imagine on the other side of the fence you're thinking, just grow up, just get a life.
But football is about being a big kid, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, so
I actually don't mind some pettiness. It depends how it's directed. I remember that's just reminded me of one of my earliest sort of memories of listening to, I guess, the early attempts at fan media was 606 when David Mellor used to host it.
Yeah.
And someone rang up and just started talking about like the Forest game or something, then just randomly shouted that it was a see you next Tuesday, and I thought it was one of the best things I'd ever heard as a kid.
Because swearing is cool. When
and David Mellor was one too. So Chelsea one at that.
If it happens to be a day for the ages, Saturday, then it'll be absolutely immense. If it doesn't, then quite honestly, I can't wait to see the back of Saturday, and then just everybody get ready to go again.
I suppose the one slight consolation of going into the playoffs this time is there is a sufficient gap between whatever happens on Saturday and then the first leg of the playoffs. It's 8 days, and then it's effectively another. So it's going to be now on 2 weeks until you're back in Ellen Road again. Just enough time to rebuild the hope and a little bit of optimism and the chance to forget, I suppose, the kind of the collapse towards the back end of the season. No, it's been a collapse. But
no, that's the weird thing. There isn't actually that much to forget, is there?
No, but just to get it out of your system.
It's a little bit like that break you get when over a closed season, where no matter how shit your transfer business has been in summer, you still get back in there on the opening day and go, maybe this is going to work.
Yeah.
Against all logic, maybe this is going to work this year. And then by half time, you're like, oh, maybe not.
Well, we will wrap it up there then for this season, just about. But we'll be back next week.
There's a month left.
Bloody loads to go, isn't there? But yeah, we'll be back next week with more inane chat about Leeds United. And I mean, we don't want any of this to go away, do we? Really, we don't want to shut the club down. It's too much fun.
The Premier League shit anyway.
Yeah.
The best bit is getting there.
Are people going to think the Premier League is shit if it's the Championship again next season?
No, both things.
It's the right answer.
Both things can be true. They're both shit.
Yeah.
Let's get to League One.
Yeah, but we tried that, and that was shit as well.
Leave the country and go to the League of Wales.
Yeah,
Something
but
like
but that's actually genuinely why I came up with the idea of folding the club, because the Premier League's dreadful. And now that they're talking about playing like a season opener as part of their deal with NBC or whatever for the rights, we'll play a season opener over there. And there is a part of me that would find it very hard to stomach if I didn't get to go to Ellen Road for the first game of the season and it was in Dallas or something like that. I would find that a little bit upsetting as a concept.
I think the problem with the Championship is that there's no novelty value in it for Leeds. And there has been a touch this season when it comes to winning games again, because that was not happening last season or the season before. But the longer it goes on and the more season follows season, the more you feel like you're going round the same roundabout that you've been on for about 2 decades. And in the Premier League, for Leeds, it is a bit more novel going to certain clubs, because it's been a while, or had been, when they got promoted. And I do think in the Premier League, if you've got a plan, you do have things you can chase, like Europa Conference League and stuff, which I know gets a bit of a doing. But you still get European trips with it. And
I love it.
Yeah, there's stuff to be had there.
The problem is it feels a million miles away. That's
Bring back the Anglo-Italian Cup, something for the lower league teams.
What I will say, actually, Phil, and do you agree with this, is the new PSR rules that are coming in now. They're not coming in for this next season, are they? It's the one after. May benefit Leeds versus some of the so-called, air quotes, smaller clubs in the division, because Leeds can probably turn over a lot more money than, let's say, Brentford, for example, Luton, teams that are down towards the bottom end, and I know that, so the new deal is going to be a multiple of the lowest team's broadcast revenue. So, but you're still talking about 500 million quid. And
there's 2 parts to it. So they're moving from acceptable losses at the moment, 105 million over 3 seasons, to your squad cost being limited to, I think it's 70% if you're in Europe, 80 or 85%, I should have had a look beforehand, if you're not in Europe. But they now want to, and this was voted on this week, they want to impose an additional, what they call anchoring, but it's like a spend cap, so not a salary cap as such, which means that nobody, irrespective of whether it's 70 or 80% or whatever, can spend more than a certain multiple of the lowest team's broadcast income. It's still to be agreed. The trouble with PSR is it just feels like in 6 months' time somebody will have another problem with some aspect of it, and they'll all,
do you know what it's going to be? Just to finish on this thought, it'll be Leicester again.
Might be Leicester. I mean, Man United were voting against this anchoring because nobody can agree on anything, or not en masse in the Premier League. So whether PSR actually sits, I have this thought in my head that there will come a day where everybody just abandons PSR again and says, do you know what, it's too much,
go wild,
too much hassle. Do what you like. And I know with PSR, if you're in Europe, so like Manchester City, for example, you can spend less in terms of percentage than anybody else, or at least the clubs who aren't in Europe, but you can still spend huge amounts more than most others. And yes, anchoring would stop you at a certain point, but the anchoring limit will still be higher than, for example, anything Leeds could pay in a season or spend in a season on their squad.
Just talking about Leedsy things as well.
Yeah.
Given what Leicester have done this year, which is basically stick 2 fingers up to the EFL and said, you're not in charge of me, you're not the boss of me, because this all pertains to when we were in the Premier League. So your rules don't apply this season. Leeds could have potentially got away with some of that next season if we wanted to just say, do you know what, we're going to do what they did and just try and go up, but they'll change the rules in the summer.
The problem was, for the most part, it was Radrizzani in charge, who I don't think had the money to lose. Even if it was breaking rules, I don't think he personally would probably have wanted to chuck himself in a big £100 million hole, whereas Leicester's owners have clearly been like, well, it's whatever.
Yeah,
it's about the rules as opposed to being about the paying of bills, isn't it, at Leicester? It's not like an Everton situation where, yes, they're broken rules and they're also skint. There's no real hint that they are about to go under or anything. It's just that they have broken rules.
They also run the risk now, Leicester, that the first thing that happens in the summer, or it happens early in the summer, is that they get deducted points.
And that's why I'm keeping the bookmarks, Phil.
Well, yeah, definitely. But of course, then they'll appeal, because you might as well. Forest's appeal is due to be, the outcome of it is due to be announced any moment, or within days. Your money would definitely be on those 4 points getting reduced, because A, the Premier League don't seem to be able to implement the rules as they'd like to at the outset, and B, every time anybody challenges it, it just seems to be a case of, all right, we'll cut this down again, which sort of makes the whole thing pointless. So even if Leicester get a deduction of sorts, you don't know what it'll end up at, and I don't know how any of what's going on with Everton or Forest creates any kind of precedent or framework for how many points you should actually get deducted, because nobody seems to know.
Well, let's leave the show then on the words of the Jackson sisters. I believe in miracles.
You always believe in
You
miracles,
sexy
Daniel.
thing, different one.
No, don't you?
I mean, you didn't sound like you were believing in miracles on Saturday morning. However, week's a long time in football.
Right, well, we'll see what happens and speak to you next week.
The Square Ball Podcast.